Okay, Fintech is possibly one of the hottest topics on the digital scene right now, financial technology. Our next speaker is going to be talking about the uprise of Fintech. So please welcome Julia Streets, CEO of Streets Consulting.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So good morning, everybody. My name's Julia Streets. I am quite weird, in truth. So I can't deny it. I've tried to. It doesn't work. So basically, I have quite a weird, mashed up life. So by day, I run my own business. I'm an entrepreneur. I've been running my own company for 10 years. I come from 25 years in financial services. My life is all about fintech. So I can't tell you how excited I was when somebody said, could you come and talk about fintech, the whole subject of fintech? And also, the other parts of my life is I'm a stand-up comedian. So I think Vanessa actually had the last laugh when she said, by the way, you've got 15 minutes. So I'm going to try today, without the use of any slides at all, I'm going to try and explain to you what this whole fintech thing is all about. So basically, the fintech is essentially anything to do with financial services and technology. It's as simple as that. There are different flavors of the subject of fintech, but there's an enormous amount of investment going into it. And because we all love some big numbers, so I thought I'd just give you a bit of data on that. So basically, in the Q3 of this year, $1.6 billion has been invested by VCs into the world of fintech. So it's considerable, huge, huge investment. And if you think year on year compared to last year, that is up by about 103%. Now, I could have shown you a slide which has got a graph doing that, but you don't need that because I can just do that. Because that's basically what the industry is doing at the moment. So they're looking at fintech and they're really looking at huge innovation. But what is fintech? What is the industry all about? So I'm going to endeavor to tell you basically about the various different aspects of financial services in a matter of minutes by just waving my hands around. That's how it's going to work. So I wanted you to kind of think about this in sort of 4 or 5 different areas. So one of them is the world of capital markets, right? So institutional trading, capital markets, stock exchanges, clearing, settlement, all that kind of world. The second thing I want to think about is actually the world of corporate banking. So actually think about large global financial institutions and the things that they have to think about. Then also think about what they are doing for their large corporate customers and the dynamics at play there. Then we're going to get into the SME market. And then we're finally going to, not last but definitely not least, into the retail market. So what fintech is doing for all of us. And it always comes down to some fundamental principles, which is about regulation. Everything is to do with regulation. And when you talk about fintech, you'll hear people talk about regtech. And regtech is basically anything that is driven by regulation, that is creating innovation and technology to address some of the concerns in these key areas that I'm about to go through. Ready? Hopefully. They'll go, no, we're quite scared, actually. But here we go. So this is how it's going to work. And I say at this end is all about retail, but the reason why any of this matters, actually, in my mind, starts largely and finishes because of us in the room. So how many of you are invested in a pension? Excellent. Those of you who are not, big message for today, get yourself invested. Seriously. That is not a joke, by the way. That is a really serious message. Another day, another time. So the whole thing is when you make investments into your pensions, they then go into this institutional world where the world of institutional asset management is making decisions about how to ensure that there is enough money for you, or not, when you retire. So the whole thing is that they basically are collecting these enormous multi-billion pound funds that are basically driven by pension fund investors. So imagine Cadbury Schweppes, okay? So they are thinking about all of their employees and their future, or any other pension fund. Think about all of those investments that are coming together and what do they do with them? Because you can't just keep them in the bank, you've got to make that money work. So they go out at the advice of basically pension fund consultants who are also thinking about how you look at the entire market, so some technology around that, and there's going to be some shifting dynamics about the roles and responsibility of pension fund consultants, what we'll see coming up. And then they are basically going out to the institutional asset management industry, what we call the buy side, and they're basically making decisions about who we're going to give our pension fund assets to and what are they going to do with it. Those buy side firms then have to make a decision about where and in what to invest. And so they'll be looking for the sell side, the broker-dealer community, to do two things for them. One of them is to basically come up with research that will support their investment ideas. Do you buy and sell? Do you take a larger holding in a PLC? Do you take a smaller holding? Those big critical decisions. They'll look at their portfolios as a whole and think, are they well balanced, given all the geopolitical things that are going on at the moment? So they look to the sell side, the broker-dealers, for research, and they look at them for transactions, so basically for execution of trades. Now, the thing about that is actually there's some really big dynamics happening on the whole thing about research and looking at where do you get your research from, and ultimately who pays for it. And there are new technology platforms that are coming out looking at the whole way in which it's called unbundling. Because it used to be that basically all your transactions and your research were bundled into one commission, and that's being separated out. And it's at the point of separation and change that's where you see innovation come through. And again, a whole new topic for a whole other day. But that's some of the dynamics that are happening there. And then those buy-side firms are basically, the sell-side firms, having thought about research, are thinking about transactions. And they're trading. And they're going out and they're basically looking at all the stock exchange venues that exist around the world and thinking about where they're going to put their trades. And these happen at literally microseconds, millisecond speeds. And there are markets for speed and there are markets for size. And the markets for speed are the ones that are looking at high-frequency trading. They're looking at basically, they need to have ultra-fast connectivity. So we're looking at things like field programmable gate array technology to basically just get the fastest processing possible, because you're going to be churning lots and lots and lots of trades at a time. And then there are markets for size where you're going out and making a huge trade, but the secret is not to let anybody know what you're doing. Now, the thing about this world is that people go, oh, well, it sounds very secretive. We don't like that at all. Actually, that's a very sensible thing to do, because for the pension funds, it's about protecting your investment ultimately. And in everything that I've just painted there around research and transactions and market connectivity and going out to stock exchanges, transactions, the regulators are going, we want you to demonstrate, it's a terrible expression, best execution. It is a comedian's nightmare to use that line. So best execution is basically all about being able to demonstrate that you have transacted at the best possible cost. So that is the world of capital markets. There is a ton of innovation happening in that. And when people say that fintech is a new thing, I would argue that actually in the institutional market, there's been an enormous amount of innovation going on for some time. But let's move into the world of banks. Let's look at, so let's think about some of the regulation that's driving that. In capital markets, it's called MiFID II. The Markets in Financial Instruments Directive that comes into effect on the 3rd of January next year. And if you, just take my word for it, the whole of the kind of institutional market is in a headspin about how to deal with some of this, and there's new innovation that's helping them do that. In the world of banks, they're thinking about corporate finance, they're thinking about mergers and acquisitions, they're thinking about trade finance and treasury. How do they look after the money and the assets of that bank to make sure that they are stable? This whole context in the economic crisis about too big to fail, stress testing. You'll see it in the press all the time. They're looking at their balance sheets. They're thinking about how they can work that money for the bank and for their investors, their shareholders, and their customers as much as possible. And we're seeing a huge wave of innovation happening in that area. If you go down, the reason I'm going faster is because Simone's just waved at me. If you go into the world of SME market, now this is really interesting. I know I've just said everything is interesting. Welcome to my head. This is really interesting. This is all about looking after the smaller corporates. And there's a larger corporates, and there's, it's got to put that into the big banking thing. But in the smaller corporates, it's actually the cost of doing business for smaller businesses is much, much higher. And the risks are much, much higher. But actually, there are a number of things that businesses like mine need. And that's around, obviously, payments. Some of it's around being able to get some advice about what to do with my assets, etc. Thinking about foreign exchange, thinking about trading. And then, so there's a huge wave of innovation there. And this is all driven by the appetite for payments. We just all want to get paid, and we all want to pay. That's a simple kind of premise in there. And there's a huge piece of regulation coming next year called the Payment Services Directive 2. There was one, they decided it wasn't enough, they went twice. But that's a piece of innovation that's also coming in January, which the industry has to deal with. And we're seeing huge interaction between financial institutions. Remember, most banks did everything in secret. They were like, this is our way of doing business. Our competitive edge is going to be proprietary. Now that world is being shifted on its axis, because actually they're looking for open banking. You'll hear a lot about open banking, and that's the use of APIs. The intention being that I as an investor, or actually I as a customer of any financial institutions, I say banks, but of course there are flavors of that, can basically at any time be able to look at the market and think about, first of all, can I see all my assets and all my investments and all my deals, if you like, in a single view? And that's incredibly difficult to do. So that's one of the intentions of the regulator, to basically to open this up. And then the other thing is also to be able to get a competitive edge by looking at what's available in the market, so I'm much more empowered to make decisions, not just what the banks sell me, but I can look at the market as a whole through a single view. That is incredibly challenging. The reason why it's challenging is because if you take the large banks, the large corporates, and the SME market, all of this is underpinned by databases. It's underpinned by legacy technology, which is incredibly difficult to get it to work together. So there's a huge wave of innovation happening in data. When you manage your data and you store your data, you can then extract, you can enrich, you can visualize your data in interesting ways. And this is where it looks at this, because actually the reason why that matters, because when you get down to the retail end and actually all the way through us as customers, as investors, as business owners, as pension fund investors, it's about actually, where's my identity? Who am I? And actually, what information do I give away? And this is everything you'll hear about this, no doubt, throughout the conference, GDPR. GDPR coming into effect next year as well. And the whole thing about understanding who owns the data, the right to delete the data, and many flavors around that. So this is, again, in the world of fintech and financial institutions, it's really putting people or setting some very clear objectives about areas where they must focus. And again, that's where we're seeing huge technology come through. Then plus also into the world of foreign exchange. Thinking about, retail foreign exchange. If you want to go up this end as well, when we're trading equities, that's very straightforward, but we go derivatives, fixed income, foreign exchange. And you see the worlds begin to kind of bend a little bit, which is around, if you kind of take the institutional market and you take the retail market and you begin to get those worlds moving together, we're seeing some technology that is actually bringing all that together. So everything from enterprise-wide platforms to APIs so that people can collaborate, so get that data flowing through, that you get a single view. It's all about the single view of your customer, know your customer, money laundering, the KYC, it's called Know Your Customer sort of initiatives all around the regulation that's driving that. That is where we're seeing the banks really challenged from moving their mindsets from going, these are our customers, this is our way of working, this is our business, to then thinking about how do we serve our market better. This is a really quick canter through that. There are many things that I haven't talked about. So I haven't talked about the world of insurtech. I haven't talked about AI. I haven't talked about some of those tools that when you get onto your data, you can extract and enrich and develop products from it. Insurtech, the whole thing about where do you buy your insurance from? Through, by the way, IoT. So I want to have devices which are all ultimately connected with my lifestyle. And if I'm actually very healthy, because my watch tells me so, that actually when I go and buy insurance, I should get a better deal on that. Then how's that data then flowing through to me as a customer through that single view? We also haven't talked about biometrics, the whole thing about when you open an account, so I can be able to look at my phone and it will basically help me be able to open my account faster, onboarding customers faster. There's a huge wave there. And there are two things I do want to leave you with. One we're going to talk about in a second, which is cyber. Every single bank, and this goes right the way up to the board because there are senior manager regimes that are making accountability sit on the shoulders of the senior executives. No longer knowing is no longer a defense. So actually, things around cyber and the reputational damage of cyber, which we're going to talk about in a second. But then the other thing, which comes back to the purpose of this room, which is actually around diversity and inclusion. The banks are looking at diversity and inclusion like they've never looked at it before. I sit on so many panels, I chair so many conferences, and where we talk about actually looking at the industry, and this is an enormous opportunity, and I cannot stress this enough. This is an enormous opportunity for diversity and inclusion because we have skills and talent that we need in the industry in financial services more than ever before. So it's exciting you're here. I'm delighted to have got to talk at high speed about something I'm deeply passionate about, which is fintech. I'll leave it there. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.